truth when we look at it on the ground. And one of the reasons why devolution was supposed to work is to have now those national resources brought down to the county government, and as a result, equity would be felt. That possibly may not have happened, or maybe I would like to hear your comments. Do you think that has happened? And if not, why?
I think to a large measure it has. I think if there's anything that no one will doubt, is that if you compare the process of resource distribution nationally, pre-devolution and post-devolution, there's obviously a difference. There's a huge difference. Is it sufficient? Of course not. Remember that one of the things that was supposed to happen in our devolution structure is that the bulk of service delivery, if you look at the distribution of functions in the Constitution, the 90% of the services that affect Mwananchi is allocated to the county government. The assumption then was that sufficient resources then for the county governments to provide those services would then be granted. Now, so whereas we have resolved the question of equity in terms of distribution and ensuring that everyone is getting a reasonable share of the national resource, the sufficiency of that resource is still in question. And what has happened, if you look at the amount of money that sometimes have been left at the national government on services that are allocated by the Constitution to county governments, there's a big question there. And I think that is one of the conversations going to the next phase of devolution we'll need to have. What is reasonable in terms of what, particularly when you look at services that are carried out, that are allocated by the county governments, what is reasonable for the national government to retain by of resources? If you take something like health, health is a fully devolved function other than referral hospitals. So therefore, if you look at the budget on a year allocated to health, if you say it's 300 billion shillings, we should be able to say that the national government carries out 20% of the health function. So they should also only have 20% of the resources. So part of the complaints we have about county government's inability to deliver functions is actually that we have not granted them sufficient resources. And unfortunately, the narrative is that, but they are stealing the money. You know, that is the saddest narrative about devolution. The truth of the matter is, if you were to do shilling for shilling comparison of theft in this country, because theft happens, if you were to do shilling for shilling comparison, the county governments are actually babies in this business. In comparison to, that's true. If you go to the budget and look at every ministry and say this ministry lost 7 billion, then go to the counties and find out what sort of monies we are talking about, even if you multiply them by 47. It is child's play. So the answer to resources is not to say don't give them to the counties because they're going to get stolen. Because anyway, even at the national government, stealing is taking place. Let us close the loopholes for every level of government not to waste resources. But let us give resources to the entity of government that is given that service. Because ultimately, services is not about county governments. You see, county services are about Kenyans. So if the Constitution decided health should go to county governments, allocate them what is reasonable resources. That is number one. Then when we come to equity, let me tell you one of the other failures of the county governments themselves. When resources have gone to the counties and they're equitably distributed, when you get to the county headquarters, a lot of county governments are also playing politics with the distribution of resources within the county now. And there's many complaints about exclusion now within the counties. And I think that is the other conversation we need to have. How do we ensure that even within the counties you have equity and that you have accountability at that level?
Okay. Yeah. Dismas, do you agree that the financial side of it is, you mentioned that it's a challenge, and I don't know what your thoughts are in regards to what Kamoto says, that and it's an excuse to say that since they're stealing the little, let's not give them more. But again, if you would use even the Bible that says to whom much is given, much is required. If they're given that little, that means if they're able to steal from that little, wouldn't it just be a multiplication once they get more?
Kamoto Iganjwe is a lawyer. I don't know whether there's a legal provision which says that you can only allocate resources to the county government once they confirm to the entire world that they have not stolen a coin. I don't know whether there is that kind of a provision. And instead of the national government saying that we are not going to give you more resources, because probability of you stealing is very high, they should come up with systems and controls to ensure that nobody steals that amount of money. And there are so many experts in Kenya. We've got accountants, auditors, who can come up with those bulletproof systems to ensure that you don't steal the resource. And in the likely event that you've stolen the resource, but the prevailing situation is, in the likely event that you steal the resource, then there must be consequences to that. Because what is happening today, it's very clear, black and white. The Auditor General keeps on giving us the reports every single day, telling us resources have been stolen. And it's done his bit of the constitutional obligation, what he's supposed to be doing. But what happens after that? Like, for instance, the case of Kakamega, there's a Bukungu Stadium, which is supposed to come up at a cost of 1 billion. And before it's even halfway complete, the thing has already collapsed. And so it means the quality of workmanship has been compromised. Is there going to be a consequence on that? The answer is likely not. In Baringo, I've been told there are so many ghost workers, people are being paid a salary who do not exist. Is there going to be a consequence to that? No. And for me, I think it's a deliberate measure by both the national government as well as the county governments to ensure that we've got a weak system, weak controls. Because if you go to the private sector, all the organizations in the private sector, they've got very solid systems that a probability of you stealing even 10 shilling is almost zero.
Is it really
why can't we take the same to the public
is
sector?
Is it really a question of weak controls? Because if you look at, for instance, the IFMIS, which of course has become a major loophole, is it really the system that's a problem, or is it the people operating the system that deliberately compromise it to a point where even if it was foolproof, they would still look for loopholes?
You know, it's human beings who constitute those systems. So a system is not as if it's something which is mechanical outside that you just go press a button and you take a walk. Even if it's pressing that button, it's still supposed to be a human being. The tragedy is that there is no consequence to any mischief taking place. Like, for instance, if you look at the county government of Machakos, the MCAs have decided that we are going to hold our governor accountable. There's some issues here that we'd like to question. But what has happened? A number of them have been taken out to, we are told that in Arusha. Now that's compromising systems. And again, on the second note, the quality of the MCAs, because we are told that a number of those MCAs in the county governments are unable to understand the basics on how the county government is supposed to work.
Okay.
They've got zero understanding of basics in accounting, in economics, or even in law. So even when they're looking at those budgets, they're actually yawning. They cannot wait to get a sitting allowance and proceed for the next meeting.
In fact, I was going to say that one of the fundamental failures that we as a country must accept is that having accepted that we wanted to ensure that the power of self-government is given to the people, we invested a lot in ensuring we have a very effective executive. So we even said, for you to be a governor, you must have a degree. For you to have to be a member of the executive, the county minister, you must have a degree. Even people's expectations on what a governor should be like, even before putting aside the law, were very clear. So that is why if you look at all the governors that were elected, there are particular caliber of people. It is people largely who have succeeded in business, in the private sector, in politics, a few of them. So there's a sense in which we told the people, this is what the governance system at the county is going to be like. But we forgot that the second arm of the county government is the assembly, which is the one that holds these people. It is first, it is the one that plans. It is the one that budgets. And then it is the one that oversees these people. But the quality of our members of the county assembly, and it is not their fault, is totally wanting. I have gone to about 40 of these counties in my period at the commission. And I can tell you without a doubt, other than maybe 2 or 3 counties, the asymmetry between the executive and the assembly is huge, you know. So in a sense, what happens is that the executives can get away with a lot. And I think if there's anything we need to do in the next phase is to ensure that we have invested in the right quality of the county assembly members. Coming back to the issue of systems and people, I am a firm believer myself in IFMIS. Even when we were doing the public finance management law, I was very clear that we need a system. Because the truth of the matter is that money gets lost in this country, but the problem always is that it was very difficult to track. The beauty of the IFMIS system is that, yes, because generally we have a culture of wanting to defraud systems, is that we will try to defraud the system. The advantage of the IFMIS system is that it tracks every movement. So
right
it's
now
very
we can
difficult.
actually pinpoint.
You can pinpoint who did. The question is what this man is saying. So what? You see, because you see, the system can only help you so much if people know that if you do this and you're caught, there will be consequences. For as long as there are no consequences, you can have the best system. People know that even if there's a VAT, they can get away with it. And so the answer for me, in fact, when I hear governors complaining and say, oh, let's remove IFMIS, I panic. Because the solution is not to remove it. The solution is to say, One, let us strengthen it so that it is fully functional, because as it is now, it is not fully functional. Ensure that it is fully functional. And then number two, ensure that when we catch anyone subverting the system, there must be consequences. Once people see that there are consequences, I can guarantee you that a lot of people are going to, but for as long as people know you can get away with it, they are going to get away with
regardless of the system that is there.
Yeah, and because the evidence is there now. I can tell you that today, if you went to the IFMIS system, you can actually tell who it is who facilitated the movement of money illegally. And let's also distinguish between two things. And that is also something that concerns me even in our audit reports. There is theft. You see, what we have done now is we have convoluted three things. One is pure fraud. You know, when people go to NYS and you add zeros, you know that is not corruption.
That's fraud.
That is fraud, that is theft. And those should not even be in an audit system. Those are people who should be in court one on day one. Then we have those people who do not follow the prescribed rules. You know, maybe the MTC did not meet, but the goods were delivered, you know, properly, and the goods were delivered at cost. That's a different thing. Then there are those issues where you followed the system, yes, everything was followed, but people either double charged or, you know, things were overpriced. Again, the problem is, when we talk about corruption in this country, we generalize everything. And so we never know. So those who are stealing get away with it, and sometimes those we punish are those who purely subverted the process. And I think we need to be very clear even in the audit report so that we distinguish the three, because the consequences for the three should be different. Some of them should be purely administrative censure. Others should be jail. Others should be people who are sacked. We need to make a distinction between those three so that we realize where are we losing the most and where do we need to put more investment.
All right, and just a reminder that the phone lines are now open in case you'd like to ask a question or maybe just to participate and let us know how devolution has worked for you, because at the end of the day, it was meant for you as Wanjiko, Atieno, wherever you are as a Kenyan. Devolution really was designed for you to have services closer to you, for them to be more efficient, for them to be more cost effective. So as a result, we need you to participate in this conversation. So Dismas, coming back to you, looking at where we are today, what are some of those tangible things that devolution should have already delivered by now? We're now almost 5 years into, you know, this particular regime, and devolution is one of the things, the hallmarks that was supposed to have transformed this country. Almost like Kamoda had said, the expectations were very high and maybe may not be met. But what are some of those tangible things that we're supposed to have had by now?
You know, coming from the countryside where medical care is a complicated issue, one of the principal benefits of devolution was having functional systems. That when you get sick and you go to your nearest dispensary, or you go to a health center, or you go to an hospital, you actually get medical attention without having to struggle. Right now, if you go to all these hospitals, erroneously referred to as a referral hospital by all the county governments, you're going to be surprised, you're going to be shocked because there's no medical attention. Why does this happen? Now, tribalism has disappeared from the national level and it has gone to the county governments. In majority of the hospitals you have at the county level, for some reason, the governors do not place a premium on meritocracy. What they want to do is to employ people from their villages to run those hospitals. And even the MCAs right now have got an overbearing influence because they're saying, yule kijana wa fulana amemaliza university, mpatie kazi hapo. Instead of looking at quality, instead of looking at meritocracy. And even in the award of tenders or supplies to those hospitals, the same hospitals, and I speak because I come from one of those counties which has been affected, instead of looking at suppliers to give quality service, what the governors have done so as to compromise the quality of governance is to give those tenders to MCS to supply staff to the hospital. So what does that do? They compromise the quality of the supplies to the hospital, because if an MCA has done a shoddy job, or a company owned by MCA has done a shoddy job, the governor is unlikely to take any action because he wants to use that as a bait in future to negotiate. And if you do not have a quality human resource in those facilities, nothing happens. And maybe it's a good example as to why Governor Isaac Ruto had to go to South Africa. Because as the chairman of the Council of Governors, he knows very well that healthcare is a devolved function. He had been given a lot of resources. So if you cannot treat a basic scratch on the face and you've been given a lot of resources, what do you expect from the other 190? And then number two is the issue of roads. A section of the roads are being done by the county governments, but the roads are done in such a shoddy manner that with the appearance of light rains, everything disappears. And what I understand from suppliers, what they've been able to do right now is to accumulate huge debts. They've employed so many people. So the wage bill is much higher than what goes to development. So really, there is no capital development in majority of the counties.
Okay, Bonakamodo Iganjo, we are heading to 2017, and Kenyans are again at a point where we have to decide who are going to be our leaders. What would your projection be in terms of advising Kenyans when we're looking for leaders? Because evidently things rise and fall on leadership, and there is a problem. The fact that devolution has not delivered in some areas may not necessarily because of resources, may not be because systems are not in place, may not be because we don't have laws that regulate, but the leadership.
I think one of the saddest things about the story of devolution is that we also have a very broad brush approach to how we analyze the success or failure of devolved governments. I think going forward, and I think the media has a responsibility to do that, is that we need to tell some of the success stories, because there are success stories. I think if you go around this country, you will find some counties where some things are working. And I think it's important that we look out for those, because then we can start to tell Kenyans that it is possible. Because what is now happening is that a lot of people feel very dejected because they think, what does it matter anyway? You know, whether it is a county government or it is a national government, we are still not getting services. So we need to look out for those positive examples and sell them. Number two is that we also, as the local elite of those counties, we must now also find ways of structuring accountability systems that enable the citizen to hold the government accountable. You see, one of the sad things that happen is that with devolved government, whereas the devolved bureaucracy moved to the counties, a lot of what you call the accountability mechanisms, whether in civil society, even in the entire non-state actor community, is actually largely in Nairobi, you know. So you have quite a bit of work that is done in terms of holding the national government accountable and ensuring that enough noise is made when things go wrong. But you don't find the equivalent of that in the county. So in a sense, the county governments had been allowed to run roughshod around the citizen without the opportunity for citizen accountability. And the reality is that if we don't grow the systems of citizen accountability going forward, the sorts of things that Dismas is saying are going to happen. Number three is that issue we have talked about, holding people accountable. A lot of those things that we're talking about, if you read the typical report of the Controller of Budget, the report of the Auditor General, those reports are there and those things are provided for. They're provided there. But when you look at the process through which that is supposed to be overseen, for example, by the Senate, you find that the Senate itself has almost decided to deal with the lowest common denominator, which is to try and punish the governors, you know. And so what you find is that a lot of the senators are more concerned with punishing their governors with whom they have political competition, as opposed to be doing what the institutional responsibility was, which is to ensure that you hold the county government responsible to abide with the law. And those reports in the Controller of Budget report are there, and those reports of the Auditor General are there. So part of it is to ensure that going forward we need to redefine and re-emphasize the role of the Senate in ensuring that all of these things that are going wrong are not happening, and that where they do, people are held accountable. And also to ensure then that we grow up the citizen accountability mechanism. And number three, people must be held accountable when things go wrong. Now, the question of who we elect in the next elections is going to be critical, particularly at the level of member of county assembly. We must raise the stature of that office to say that this is the office that actually determines the temperature of the county.
Right.
And that is something I think we need to sell to the people, that it cannot be that you're looking for, you know, the greatest businessman in the county, but you're looking actually for someone who has the ability to understand financial matters, planning issues, accountability issues, so that you can hold the county government accountable.
All right. Dismas, do you agree that that's possibly the way we need to go forward, especially raising the bar for MCAs?
Well, maybe let's look at an example of successful economies. Like in Germany, you are told that if you want to be a millionaire, you want to be a billionaire, you want to accumulate wealth, please don't go to the public service. stay in the private sector and make your money and become a billionaire. At some stage, if we need you, like Donald Trump will come looking for you. But unfortunately, in Kenya, if you want to become a millionaire, you want to become a billionaire, the easiest place to make money is in the public sector. So majority of the people who run for political office, it's not because they identify Kenya as national security interests or they want to take Kenya to the next level. No. All they need to do is, as soon as they assume office, use that office as a factor of production. And these are something which started way in independence from 1963. I understand there was an Ndegwa Commission which allowed people to do business with governments. That's why when you are appointed, say, as a CS or a PS, the first thing to do is to incorporate several companies and start doing business with the government of the day. So even for the MCAs, in as much as we want to raise the bar, maybe in terms of academic qualifications, again, which is subject to debate, because given the number of governors with bachelor's degree, master's, PhDs, or even the principal secretaries, cabinet secretaries with a very high level of qualifications, still there's a lot of theft going on. So the fact that you've got a high level of education does not mean that you cannot steal. If anything, it gives you the powers to steal in a clever way. So maybe what we must do is encourage people who really are dedicated to serving the nation to take up those positions. Mm-hmm. And like, for instance, for the case of an MCA, if we simply elect somebody who dropped maybe at class 4 and has got a welding facility within the ward, and because he supplies, furniture to everybody, he's become very popular, he's got money, he can now run for office. But when he goes to the county assembly, his first interaction with any written literature is when he's going through those records, then we shouldn't expect much. So we should encourage people who are actually interested in serving Wanjiku, people who are interested in taking Kenya to the next level, to occupy these offices. But again, from the samples you have, that seems to be like an endangered species. Okay. Because stealing in Kenya today has become fashionable.
The order of the day.
Yeah. Like,
and we actually sometimes reward some of those people in terms of getting them back in office. Bwana Kamotho Iganjo, how do we raise that bar? Is it necessarily just education? How do we identify those people that possibly have Wanjiku in mind as opposed to just being selfish?
Let me say two things. One, I think that the issue of education is not that let's elect educated people. Mm. It is that these people are elected with responsibilities. So they must have the educational and background to be able to carry out those responsibilities. If you're going to do someone who prepares the county fiscal strategy paper, surely that person needs to have been going to school. So that's just a basic minimum. But it's amazing that I find it amazing that if you go to the village today and you want to appoint somebody to the local funeral committee that handles money, we would know who we cannot appoint to that committee, because that person is known not to be trustworthy. Why don't we apply the same rules when it comes to public sector? Why is it that when it comes to our private resources, we're very clear. If you go to the local coffee factory, where people know their coffee is going, they're very clear about who they are appointing for treasurer. They're very clear about who they appoint for chair. They know who they don't want near their money. But for some reason, when it comes to the public sector, we have no problem with appointing all manner of people with a very questionable background, people we know for a fact. So there's a sense in which also the citizen must also disconnect with this assumption that what are called public resources. There's no such thing as public resources. These are private resources. This cup of tea that I am taking here, which may cost 100 shillings, 50 bob is actually going to government. So today, this morning, when I bought my cup of tea for 50 shillings, I paid 50 shillings into what it is my money. And I think that is a distinction people need to make. And then so that what you should be asking, if you are appointing somebody to run your business, would you appoint this character? Many of you will tell you, I would never allow him near my factory. But why is it I'm okay to elect them to hold an office in the public sector? So that is something that Kenyans need to internalize. Because I think we've also blamed, we've also allowed the public to get away with a lot, in a sense as if they have no responsibility, that they must be told as to what are the sorts of people, who they should appoint. In fact, I find it an amazing contradiction that we even say we need to provide in the Leadership and Integrity Act that these sorts of people should not be elected because they have done A, B, C, D. Basically saying that please stop them from standing Because if you allow them to stand, we are going to elect them. Why should you have to be told? And these people, by the way, we know them. So what I am saying is that we need not to tell the people that when you elect these people, you're actually appointing them to run your resources. So if you would not appoint them to run your personal resource, please do not allow them to go to the public sector. That is the place we need to start. So that is number one. Number two is that we also need to start ensuring that once we have elected them into office, and I think that's an area we have not invested as much, what are the structures we need to put in place as citizens, to ensure that it doesn't happen? Remember that the reason we devolved is so that the governor of Kisumu is held accountable by the people in Kisumu. And the people in Kisumu live there. So if the governor is known to be responsible for the pilferage of public resources, if the local MCA is known, why is it that we just continue to live with them and we are very happy, but we make a lot of noise? Surely, and I'm not talking about that we go and punish them and now we take over from government in terms of enforcing the law. But surely we must make it uncomfortable because these are our neighbors. We must make it uncomfortable at the local place for people to know. When I see demonstrations in Marsabit, for example, for people demonstrating against wrongful procurement, that is what devolution is supposed to do. So that those people, because they live with you, they start to feel the pain. And you know, but for as long as we allow them to get away with it, we talk on the talk shows and we talk in the newspapers, but meanwhile they can walk around free, it is going to continue. So the role of the citizen is something we have not emphasized. Yes, the institutions, the Auditor General must work, the Controller of Budget, the EACC, the DPP, we have myriads of institutions, but ultimately the citizen must ask themselves, why am I not concerned about my local resources? If today you passed through my home in Kora and you took my banana, I would not go looking for EACC. You know, because I consider that my private resource. But why is it that I'm okay if you take a public resource? It isn't okay. Hiyo ni mali ya umma. It is not mali ya umma. It is mali yangu. So we must now say that mali ya umma ni mali yangu. And so I must look out for it. Yeah.
Must you agree that Kenyans need to take more responsibility and not, like I'll repeat, not taking the law into their hands, but we have to make it uncomfortable, to use Kamotho Iganjo's words?
Well, maybe let's use some global examples. A country which has been able to manage corruption very well is Denmark, for two reasons. If you play around with public resources, you are stigmatized. You are treated as if from the Bible you've got leprosy. Nobody wants to touch you. Even your daughter will not get married. Your son will not get married. So essentially, you become an outcast in society. That alone has got a huge deterrent effect. And another thing they've done very well is public disclosure of information. Because this money, the way Ganju is indicating, when unasema kwamba hii ni pesa ya serikali ni ya Wanjiku, every person in Denmark knows that these are actually my money. So when you go to the lowest form of administration, if there's a procurement, there's a board with full disclosure of information. And it's by law that if you're going to engage in any project, you're going to do a road, you give the specifications, everybody who has declared interest, the information is posted, and again, you go the extra mile, and you lift the veil of incorporation. So that if I'm the governor for, say, Kisii County, my name being Dismas Mukua, I cannot go and incorporate a company called Weganjo and Associates and give it business. So you lift the veil of incorporation. So actually, everybody knows what is happening and even the amount of money. So when you've got that information flowing, then people will be able to understand. But what happens today in most of these counties, wherever the governor sees that people are beginning to make him uncomfortable, it immediately takes a political plunge. Then people start accusing, saying, you are making this noise because you don't like the Mandela way we are doing it. And the governors actually go the extra mile to make sure that they compromise the system. Assuming that the allegations we are getting from Machakos are actually valid, that are some of the MCAs were taken to Arusha, why would anybody want to take the MCAs who are supposed to discuss an issue of governance, an issue of accountability? Why would you want the MCAs to be out of town? And it happens in all these counties. Whenever there's a hot issue coming up, like not long ago, there was an issue coming up in Nyeri. You find that somebody within the county government has taken all the MCAs to Mombasa for a retreat. And by the time they're coming back, the guys are so quiet because they've been given tenders or they've been given promises. And when Jiku can only go to a certain extent, what we must do is to ensure that the organizations created by law for that purpose, to ensure that we've got solid governance and accountability work. For instance, today, all the governors stand accused if you go through the Auditor General's reports. And when the accusations come, they are wished away. People say, hiyo ni siasa inaletwa kwetu. When, like for instance, when Duale says Raila Odinga is protecting governors who've been engaged in corruption, one begins to wonder, how much power does Raila Odinga have that he can actually ask the Anti-Corruption Commission and the DPP not to investigate the court counties that have engaged in mischief? What one would have expected in the position of Duale is to urge and give support to these agencies to engage in prosecution. But when a governor from a Jubilee County hears what Duale is saying, and when Raila Odinga goes to Mombasa, and even before investigations are complete, and he says that when you look at Governor Kingi, he is a best practice on how you're supposed to manage corruption, and resources have been stolen, essentially it's giving people who want to engage in mischief more comfort to engage in this. So it would be important for us, everybody, including the political leadership that has got a lot of weight, to apply their weight. And yesterday I saw the proceedings at the Senate, and I was very delighted when I saw Governor Hassan Omar saying that WEPA would like to disassociate itself from the statement made by Raila Odinga, that everything is okay in the court counties. And I also saw Senator Wetangula condemning what has happened in Kakamega. That's the kind of stuff we need, that the political leaders come out. And again, you've seen the religious leaders, especially the Catholic Church, are saying they want to start, they'll start holding our leaders into account. That if you are going to engage in mischief, you go and steal public resources, we'll not be inviting you to come and give us the resources in charge. And I think we need really to support the religious community, because these people tend to have a lot of influence and a lot of say in the counties. And maybe at this stage, we should urge the National Council of Churches of Kenya, the Catholics, to be at the forefront of enforcing that chapter 6. Because if you can have a priest on a mass on a particular Sunday, spending maybe 10 minutes out of his sermon discussing issues of accountability, issues of governance, then maybe the voters will start paying attention. But more important, from the way I see it, is to stigmatize that anybody who has stolen from Wanjiru has to bear responsibility, has to take consequence. Not like the case we have, the one we were discussing prior, the one of South Korea. The fact that somebody decided to buy Viagra for the president has become a national issue. And you know, you wouldn't say that's a lot of money. I mean, I don't know how much a Viagra would cost and how many tablets they bought for her. But that alone has made people in Seoul go to the streets every single day. But what happens in Kenya when people are demonstrating? If people are going to Urpak to do the demonstration, they're beaten into a pulp because the system, for some reason, does not tolerate this kind of demonstration.
Okay, Bwana Kamodo, as a lawyer, there is a framework for certain things to be dealt with, and this is when the leaders should change the electorate in terms of delivery. But you've mentioned that Kenyans need to take maybe more responsibility and make their leaders more accountable. Other than just going to the street, what are other ways that possibly you'd recommend where we can hold our leaders accountable?
I think, and just so that I'm clear, I don't think, my point is not as an alternative to the existing systems, because ultimately Kenyan taxpayers pay tax so that these institutions can hold the governance as whatever accountable. So that must be made to work. But what I'm saying is that from what I know about how governments, what governments are most sensitive about, because these are political entities. The one thing they're most citizen about is about an unhappy citizen. And so in a sense, we need to raise the citizen consciousness. And the reality is that the law is actually there even in terms of information sharing. If you read whether it is the County Government Act or the Public Finance Management Act, the disclosure requirements that this man is talking about are actually very high. But the problem has been that these disclosure requirements, you know, there's so much information that the citizen is overwhelmed. And when I talk about the responsibility of those of us, the local elite in those counties, our responsibility now, in terms of our own citizen responsibility, is to ensure that a lot of this information is then packaged in such a way that it is useful to the citizen to make decisions. When you talk about, for example, the role of the church, every single village in this country has a church or a mosque. If we made it the business of those churches, it actually takes some time to even discuss county procurements and who it is and what is the procurement, what is the rate that are being used for graveling roads in this county as opposed to what is available in Wajir. Who are the people who have been given these counties and what has been their history? I mean, the contracts and what is their history. If that sort of information was now percolating to the citizen from institutions that are known to be apolitical, I think it would be very helpful so that we avoid this conversation which almost defines corruption in terms of a political narrative. Because the truth of the matter in this country is that the bulk of the corruption that actually happens underground and is never seen. What we see is just the tip of the iceberg. And what we see usually is what is politically convenient to show. You know, and so in a sense, if we were to ensure that every little thing, even the ones that will never find their way on KTN and on the nation headline, are actually discussed at the local level by institutions that are apolitical and are known to be apolitical. If that is where we were investing, you know, to ensure there's a lot more information, so that we even change the conversation about what does public participation mean. Public participation, in my mind, is not about calling people to come and discuss a budget. It is actually disclosing information to people so that it can inform their decision in the future, so that it can inform who they will hold accountable and how they will do that. So we need to change the framework for how we allow citizens to get engaged. For me, that is important. Even as we strengthen institutions, we must ensure that the citizen, and it is not every citizen, the church communities, the cooperative movements, the local CBOs and local CSOs, what we need to, let us grow capacity for people to hold governments accountable. If you go to my county of Murang'a and you find citizens have come out and they're demonstrating and they're making noise about something, the governor, of course, any governor will try and play the politics with it, but they are going to ensure that that issue does not keep arising over and over and over again. So I do not underrate the role of the citizen, and citizens must recognize again that these are not public resources. This is their money, which they pay. You know, people don't even assume, they say them they don't pay tax. They don't realize that for every 100 shillings of credit that you spend on your phone,
there's tax.
50% of that is going to that money, you're calling public money. So I think if we enhance consciousness on that point, then people maybe will start becoming a little more determined, there's a lot more investment in holding government accountable.
All right, and we'll like to change tune a little bit here because today is Thanksgiving Day in the United States, and by extension, we do have a message from Ambassador Robert Godek to all of you, and by extension, I guess, from the President of the U.S. And as it is tradition on Thanksgiving Day, one of the things they do is carve turkey. So we do have turkey that we're going to carve here, gentlemen, in just a bit. But first of all, let's listen in to the message from Ambassador Robert Godek from the United States.
Let me just say, first of all, happy Thanksgiving to all of the viewers of KTN. It's great to be here, and I'm very, very happy to have been able to bring a turkey for all of my friends and colleagues at KTN to enjoy today on Thanksgiving Day. Thanksgiving Day is an extraordinarily special American holiday. It's my favorite American holiday. It's a day about giving thanks. It's a day about gratitude. It's a day about family, about friends. It started 400 years ago when some of the very first people to arrive from Europe came to our shores in America. And they had a tough year. They had a tough crossing. And they met the Native Americans who were there. They learned a lot from them. They grew crops, and they had a bountiful harvest. So then in November, 400 years ago, they came together and they shared a meal. That was the very first Thanksgiving. And we've built on it over the years. We have had many different traditions. It was President Abraham Lincoln who really declared it a national holiday for the first time. But it is an extraordinary moment, I think, and it is all about giving thanks and counting our blessings. My very best memories are really being at home with my family and with friends. So we would get up in the morning. There would be an opportunity for, obviously, a meal early in the day, very special. Come around the table then for the first time. Then we would do a variety of things. We would watch, as I said, the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. Maybe we would play a little football outside. We would talk to one another. And then there would be the big dinner, the big Thanksgiving dinner. And it was an extraordinary time. And the dinner was always a long dinner. So normal dinners might be very short because people are in a rush, they have things to do, maybe you just have a few minutes around the table. But a Thanksgiving dinner would last a couple of hours, and it was just a great opportunity. And again, we had the tradition of going around and each person would say what they were grateful for that particular year. and people would talk about what was important to them. And I found it very, 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 very powerful, very moving. I'm thankful for lots of things. First of all, I'm very thankful for my extraordinary, wonderful wife, Lori, who is just so amazing and really the joy of my life. But I'm also very grateful to be able to live and work here in Kenya, for all of my Kenyan colleagues and friends, for my American colleagues and friends, for everything that we've been able to do together on so many different fronts, whether it's security or prosperity or democracy. It's all of the work that we're doing together to build bridges, to deepen and strengthen the partnership between the United States and Kenya. We've gotten a lot done, and I'm deeply grateful for that. My Thanksgiving message to Kenyans would be simply the power of gratitude. That it is always important, I think, for all of us, whether it's Thanksgiving Day or some other day, to step back, to spend time with family and friends, to think about what matters to us, to count our blessings, to be grateful for all of the gifts that we all enjoy. And also then to think about, as well, what other things we might want to do in life. What are the next steps? What sorts of things can we do to make our lives better? What can we do to make the lives of the people around us better? It's good to step back and give thanks and to think about our lives. So that would be my message. Whether it's on Thanksgiving Day, American Thanksgiving Day, or some other day, step back, give thanks, be grateful, think about what you want to do to build a better future for yourselves, for your family, for your community, and for your nation.
And that is the message from the Robert Godek, the ambassador from the US to Kenya. And basically, we do have turkey right here. And I'll admit, first of all, by saying I'm not an expert in carving turkey. But gentlemen, you'll be the first partakers of this animal.
Just assume it's a chicken and just slice it.
And just slice it. I'll start with these and give you an opportunity, even as I do this, to maybe just give your Thanksgiving message to the country and to your friends and family.
It looks very delicious.
We can start with you, Bwana Oiganjo Kamodho.
I think as a country, maybe we need to have our own Thanksgiving moment, because we're also a country that likes to complain a lot, you know, and everything is going bad and everything is horrible. The reality is that, I think our best years are ahead, and I think there are many things we can be grateful for. We are largely peaceful. I think we have a fairly good legal and constitutional system. I think the fact that we have a devolved government is a positive thing despite its challenges. The fact that we have the freedom to talk about it without worrying that when we come out here, we'll find the fellows waiting for us. There are many things I think to be grateful for. And I think we need to always pause, even as we say the challenges ahead, to say thank you, God, that you have brought us this far, even as we invest in making our country better.
We may not be able to agree on the animal that we'll use for Thanksgiving. We'll be required to go for a referendum.
No, we'll do 47. Or is it 42? 43 now. And everybody gives their own, and every year we keep changing.
Dismas, very good show. Briefly, your Thanksgiving message.
Well, I think this is a very good symbol from the U.S., and we'd like to wish our colleagues in the U.S. the best of luck, and wish them the best under Donald Trump. And as Oiganja has indicated, they need to socialize with his book, The Art of... You said The Art of the Deal. Yeah. So for them not to become nervous. And from the recent pronouncements by Donald J. Trump, I think he means well for America. And for the Kenyans who are worried that they're coming back home, I don't think they'll come back home. They'll enjoy his leadership.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. That's State of the Nation. And of course, we finish it on a very happy and Thanksgiving note, and courtesy of the U.S. Embassy, the ambassador, and by extension, Barack Obama. Happy Thanksgiving Day to all of you. And we'll take a short break. Those of us on KTN Home, we're going to Life and Style. Those of us on KTN News, after we finish enjoying the turkey, we have some news updates then. Maybe today we'll not have Tech Central, but have Turkey Central. Who knows? Do stay with us right here on Morning Express. Don't go away.